Broncos country, what is going on? I'm back here with another episode of David Talks Broncos. Would really appreciate if you give me that like. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the Senior Bowl performances of a lot of NFL draft targets. I think the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton have. And please consider subscribing if you like Broncos content. Trying to get out here all the time. So today, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about some of the guys that I've had my eye on that I was pleased to see have been talked about as draft stock risers after finishing up their week of Senior Bowl practices. Of course, they got the game tomorrow. I believe they're off today, but yeah, great start for some guys that I've had my eyes on for the Broncos. And I guess before we get into that, again, what mainly am I interested this year, this offseason with the Broncos is what do we do at the quarterback position? I don't think that we're going to have Jarrett Stidham as our starting quarterback for next year. Probably going to be another guy that that maybe might sit behind a guy like Jarrett Stidham for a little bit, but then takes on the starting roles throughout the year. Or we might see us bring in another bridge quarterback. Sam Darnold, Jameis Winston, something like that. But I'm really hoping the Broncos do draft a quarterback. And I know there's been a little bit of smoke. I covered this in my video the other day about how there's some rumors that the Broncos want to trade up, into that top three to go after somebody like Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, or Jayden Daniels. And I would absolutely love that. I think a lot of those quarterbacks have some great qualities. I don't think there's any sure thing in this draft. Caleb Williams is probably the guy that's the closest thing to that, but I would say that those guys are definitely a tier above some of the other guys that I feel like the Broncos should have their eye on that we saw at the Senior Bowl this past week as well. Now, I will say that with Dan Quinn becoming the coach of the Washington Commanders, maybe there's a chance that they trade out of that number 2, right? Can we move up 10 spots? What would it take for us to move up 10 spots to get a guy like Drake Maye or Jayden Daniels, who I think are really interesting quarterbacks? Not totally sure, but I would imagine that it would take a significant haul for them to trade down 10 spots. We're talking about probably Patrick Surtain, another future first with 12, maybe something else. Yeah. So I think right now the best approach, or if I had to put money on it, the best approach that I would see the Broncos taking is probably just trading back if there's a quarterback that they really do like. Well, let's go ahead and get into this. I'm going to go, I think I linked in the description of my video, a link to, the 33rd team and their kind of summary of the biggest risers and fallers of this year's event and Senior Bowl event. And we can go ahead and take a look at some of the Twitter clips that I've seen on them throughout practice as well. But please let me know what y'all are thinking. I'll get to your comments here in a little bit on players that you think the Broncos should be looking at, players that you feel like performed really well this week, guys that, hey, might have lowered their draft stock a little bit, but let's go ahead and get into it. I mean, you've probably seen him all over Twitter. This guy is just breaking everybody's ankles. I mean, looking like Cooper Kupp out there. Georgia wide receiver McConkey. I mean, this guy was just absolutely killing it this year. And apologies for the grainy tape. Hopefully it'll get more clear as this runs. But he looks great coming out of these breaks. Very twitchy. You love it. And we know, I mean, we might move off of our top 3 wide receivers and Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick. We might see a world or scenarios in which none of them are back. And we're really just with Marvin Mims, maybe Brandon Johnson, Jalen Virgil, if he's recovering well from that injury. I would love to see the Broncos, if we are able to trade back, draft a couple wide receivers or maybe even 3, depending on how many picks we get. But Ladd McConkey's a guy that I'm really interested in. And yeah, we need more of that speed. We need more guys that can get separation like that. We just haven't really had that. I'm hoping that Marvin Mims will be utilized more, running more of a full route tree this year. But someone brought up, I think I was talking with John Cronenberg the other day, and he just said, I think it was on the phone. I was talking with him. I'm like, why didn't we use Marvin Mims more in kind of a like a diversity of different ways, rather? And he just said, probably because Russell Wilson couldn't hit a lot of those spots on the field, which that was kind of true. But I think he did really, really well. Here they said coming into the week, there are few concerns about McConkey's ability to separate and win with his route running, and he showed all that and more this week in Mobile. He's not a physical specimen, but all that really matters is that you're getting open, right? Another guy that I've seen different Broncos podcasts as well as Broncos Twitter talk a little bit about, especially with Lloyd Cushenberry moving on in free agency most likely, is, hey, Jackson Powers Johnson, okay? Dominating at center and guard, wins consistently with power. Here he shows patience and quick. Mute. But yeah, really, really well. They said, not sure if he's lost a one-on-one rep all week. Wow. This guy might, I think that I've seen that in some mock drafts, they have him going in the first round. So, if you trade back a little bit, I would not complain about drafting more offensive linemen. I think one of the biggest themes with Sean Payton's success with Drew Brees is when they were at their best, winning a ton of games, making deep playoff runs, right? They had always one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and I think that would be wonderful. Oregon had a really good offensive line this year. They're saying he's got all pro caliber size at guard. That's wonderful. Let me scroll through a few more. There were a few more players that they talked about here. Oh, yeah. They talked about Cam Hart, the Notre Dame quarterback that's kind of going in the middle of the draft right now. But he's got great size, 6'3", 204 pounds, okay? For a bigger corner, Hart is a twitchy athlete and has fluidity that should allow him to translate to the NFL easily. Hart has not only dominated one-on-ones, but also made some huge plays in the team period and goal line work. I would absolutely love to see the Broncos grab another cornerback. Maybe we're able to kick McMillan inside a little bit. And obviously, if we trade Patrick Surtain, which I'm hoping doesn't happen, we'll definitely be in a huge need for some more secondary players. But Cam Hart's a guy that I really like as well from what I've seen. Now, I did want to go ahead and get into the quarterbacks a little bit. Let me pull up my bookmarks here. Probably the two biggest names that were talked about were Michael Pratt and Spencer Rattler. Seems like Michael Pratt definitely raised his draft stock this week. And yeah, NFL Draft Files, be sure to follow them on Twitter. He gives great breakdowns of players. But here you can kind of see his scouting report here. Michael Pratt's a tough, confident leader and a major reason for Tulane's success. Natural leader, sees the ball, processes the field well, flashes consistent ball placement, can be a threat to scramble, clean throwing motion, pre-snap prodigy, but not the best athlete. Ball security questions, his release, can he hang in the pocket? I think he can. If you go back and look at some of his games at Tulane, I think he is willing to do that. And I had questions about his arm strength, but I saw that he actually clocked, one of the fastest balls at the Senior Bowl this year or this week. Take a look at this. No, that's not what I meant. Yeah, here we go. Take a look at this. I thought this was kind of interesting. He clocked a 76 mile per hour. That's crazy. An average of 47.8. Okay. That's one of the top, only behind Joe Milton, who everybody says has a cannon, right? Granted, when you're throwing at practice and stuff like that, it's just a little bit different than on game day because I was a little bit surprised to see that Spencer Rattler was like the lowest testing uh, or thrower in terms of speed of the ball, because I would consider him to have one of the best arms in the class and one of the more talented arm talents in the class. Might have the best arm talent outside the top three quarterbacks. It's kind of how I feel about it. But um, anyways, I think Michael Pratt, from what I've listened to with what Rick Spielman talked about this week at CBS Sports, is that Michael Pratt did a really good job of alleviating some of those concerns regarding his arm strength. And I'll try and pull up some of the clips that I've seen from him at the Senior Bowl. I mean, look at this. This is a deep one, deep route. Look at this ball placement. Wow. I mean, this is being thrown from like the 50-yard line, okay? Just perfectly over the shoulder, over the arm of the defensive back, on the outside shoulder of the wide receiver. I mean, that's really great. I love to see that. Spencer Rattler was another guy, and he's like my quarterback 4. You know, if the Broncos trade back, accumulate some more picks, I would love for them to take a shot on Spencer Rattler, because I think he has a lot of that moxie that you like to see in today's game, the ability to improvise. He's got that arm talent. He can throw into tight windows. It's really just about consistency, pocket presence, some fine tuning his decision making, right? But I think that he had another really good week. Let me see. Had some other. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty interesting throw right here from his time at, Oklahoma. I mean, that's an NFL style throw, but Eric Moody of ESPN had Rattler as one of his top 3 risers, in addition to Roman Wilson, who was tearing it up as well. And then, former CU Buff and USC Trojan, Brendan Rice. I think he had himself a huge week. He's a guy that I would love for the Broncos to target, especially if they're moving off of a guy like Cortland Sutton, somebody who's got that big body, that size, that physicality, that can be a red zone threat, that can go up and win those 50-50 balls. I would love to see Brendan Rice back in the state of Colorado. I would absolutely love it. Here's another clip of Spencer Rattler throwing just an absolute dime towards the sideline, and I mean touchdown, through only where that wide receiver right there could get it. Let's see if they show a replay here. I mean, just beautiful stuff. But again, can you do this when the pocket is collapsing? That's like one of the biggest questions. But I mean, you can see another angle of this. Ray G, if you don't follow Ray GQ, I love his podcast and always does great draft work, Senior Bowl work. And he was saying that, look at this. Walked into Mobile wanting to love Michael Penix and Bo Nix, and the QB that stood out the most for me was Gamecocks quarterback Spencer Rattler. Let him land on a team where he can continue to grow and develop. I was very impressed. That's why. Let's sign a veteran bridge quarterback for this next year. Okay. Have him start, half the year. Okay. And then you can, if Spencer Rattler's ready at that point, put him in there, see how he does. And hey, if we end up tanking and have to go after somebody like Shador Sanders or Quinn Ewers or whoever else is left in this class next year, the Georgia quarterback that I'm forgetting his name of right now, but that type of thing that can happen. But I would love to see Spencer Rattler on the Denver Broncos if we are trading back. And I think that I've become a lot more open to Michael Pratt as well. Again, a lot of their strengths are a little bit different, but I think they both have the talent to, if they develop, become solid starters in the NFL. And of course, Spencer Rattler was also named the top quarterback of the American team in a vote by defensive teammates at Practice Player of the Week awards ceremony today for the 2024 Reese's Senior Bowl. And I absolutely love it. So let me pull up some tapes or some highlights of Brendan Rice as well, and then I'll get to some of your comments if I can spell correctly. Man, I spelled Brendan Rice wrong on my title video. I'll need to change that. Let's see here. See if we can find some videos. Oh yeah, and Carter Bradley was there as well. I love it. Let's see here. Yeah, look at his ability to fight through the pass interference here. I love that type of physicality. Nice route there too. But yeah, again, Eric Moody had him as his top riser in addition to Roman Wilson. I mean, we know how good Roman Wilson is. I mean, that guy's a beast. I think this is a great draft for wide receivers. I think depending on what you're looking at quarterback, I mean, look at his ability again right here. I mean, this is awesome, awesome stuff. But wide receivers, if we're going after defensive linemen, offensive linemen, this is a good draft for that. I think it's a pretty decent draft for quarterbacks as well. There's a chance if the Broncos do trade back to accumulate more picks, there's a chance that they could, definitely fill a lot of the holes and help fill some of those depth issues that they have as well. All right. So, with that being said, maybe I'll get to the big board here really quick in terms of the wide receivers. Again, there's a lot of guys that we can pick from. Maybe Brian Thomas or Troy Franklin, Lad McConkey, okay? Number 31 overall from Pro Football Focus. Tez Walker was a guy that everybody seemed to think had a week in which it dropped his draft status from his performance this week at the Senior Bowl. But I mean, guys we've seen like Keon Coleman, A.D. Mitchell, Jermaine Burton, like all these guys can really play. Xavier Legette didn't have the best week either, but Jalen Polk, Xavier Worthy. I mean, these are guys that you can get in the second round. Brendan Rice, you can get in the second, third round. Jalen McMillan, another big time receiver. Roman Wilson, okay. If we're able to get, another third round pick or a second round pick, I mean, we could definitely go in this direction because, man, we need some speed. We definitely need some guys, some weapons that are going to help out whoever's playing at quarterback, some guys who are twitchy that can separate. We need all of that. So, hey, I'll go ahead and get to some comments here. What is going on, Mr. Pick 6? Hopefully I was sharing my screen. If I wasn't, man, I really do apologize. But yeah, I would love to know what your thoughts are on, who you would like to see the Broncos draft, whether they're staying at 12, moving up, moving back. But the way that I see it right now is, I mean, I would just love to move back and get some more picks. I think that this is a really good draft. Again, are any of these guys, Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, Jayden Daniels, worth the price that it's going to take for us to go and get one of them? I'm not totally sure. Honestly, who I think might have the highest upside out of the three might be Jayden Daniels because the way in which he can escape the pocket, run around, all of that, like he does have some shades of Lamar Jackson and some fantastic arm talent as well. I mean, you've seen him. I think he can make all the throws, no doubt. I think the difference between Daniels and Lamar Jackson right now is Daniels kind of welcomes and looks for contact, which, I mean, you don't want to have happen at the NFL level. I think Lamar Jackson is amazing at he's so slippery, he's able to get outside the pocket. He's able to run downfield, right? Get those first downs with his legs, but still slide. And he avoids like a lot of contact. And I think Jayden Daniels has the potential to become like that. And but some of that might have to be coached out of him a little bit. But I would love to see what Sean Payton could do with a guy that has some serious legs. We've seen what he did with Taysom Hill, uh, a guy that's kind of a dual threat. And I think tried his best to craft an offense around him. Um, but we'll have to see. I think Sean Payton, he's one of these guys that can make one of these quarterbacks that maybe falls to the late first or early second, later second. He can make the most out of them. I really do think so. Again, I think Russell Wilson, I think it's pretty clear that he was just past his prime, and I think we were hoping that his prime would have lasted a lot longer than what it was. But I think Sean Payton did the best that he could do with a quarterback that's kind of honestly at the end of his career, and I thought that he played, very well given all those considerations. So if you're bringing in a guy like Michael Pratt, who has, I believe, like a 6'4" frame. He's got a big arm. He's shown the ability to elevate talent around him, right? That's, seen as very cerebral. I like that. Or a guy like Spencer Rattler, who again has some of those same qualities that we love to see out of Patrick Mahomes, or why Caleb Williams is seen so highly. He, I, I'm a little biased because I love that sort of stuff. So the fact that he does some of those things that can kind of remind you of a Brett Favre, a generation ago, I'm all about it. And if you just need to rein him in, make him a little bit more consistent, I'm a big fan of that. So, can you coach out the inconsistencies of his game arm out? I think so, because some things you can't teach is that moxie, that competitive desire. I think a lot of people still view Spencer Rattler like, he was on that QB1 quarterback show 5-6 years ago, or his time at OU. And I think everything that happened to him at OU, it was for the betterment of him in the long run. It seemed like he really developed into a solid leader of that team at South Carolina, and he's really matured. And the way that or the clips in which I see him speak, you can really tell that he's grown as a leader. And I like his competitiveness. Some of the things in the NFL that really make a guy special is his competitiveness, his fire, his hate of losing, right? And I think it's also helpful that a guy, for instance, like Spencer Rattler, played behind a bad offensive line in college. And that kind of prepares you for the NFL, because very rarely are you going to have a clean pocket. I was just going over on my Buffs channel, David Talks Buffs, some film of one of our players, Chidozie Nwankwo, going up against Texas. And I mean, Quinn Ewers had all day to throw, and you're not going to get that type of time very often in the NFL. So the fact that some of these guys, such as Spencer Rattler, Drake Maye, Caleb Williams, didn't play behind the best offensive lines, I think that goes to, I think that benefits them in the long run. That's why I still have some questions about JJ McCarthy. He's another guy that I'm definitely interested in if we are not going to thrust him out there before he is ready. Again, I really like the idea of bringing in a bridge quarterback, a veteran quarterback who's already had experience with Sean Payton's system. That's why, hey, Jameis Winston, baby, I'm about it. I love Jameis. I would love to see him on the Broncos, even if it's for just a season or two. But then give a guy like JJ McCarthy some time to really grow, because I think he's got all the tools. But I have some questions about, is he really ready? He played behind, like one of the best offensive lines in college football we've seen in quite a while. How's he going to adjust at the NFL level? And yes, you can say he ran the offense he was asked to, but again, why wasn't Michigan really playing through him more if he was a better talent? That's if he was that guy, why aren't you putting the ball in his hands more often? I think that's a fair criticism, and we're just going to have to see. But I think ideally, or in summary, finishing up what happened this week at the Senior Bowl, I think it's very positive for quarterbacks that aren't in the top three. We're talking about Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler. I think Michael Penix, I don't really know if he changed his draft stock, but I know that he had some really good days as well. Depending on where he's drafted, I'd be okay with that, but I am a little bit worried about his durability and his injuries, the medicals, all of that. And, we'll just have to see. But I think that this Senior Day week gets me excited about the idea of trading back a little bit, acquiring more picks, because I would love to see us bring in more game changers at the skill positions, at wide receiver, at running back, as well as going big time. I didn't even talk about this, but going big time after the defensive line. Obviously Trevondre Sweat is somebody that I definitely have my eye on. There's some other guys from Texas that I think would be really great to have them here in Denver. But edge, interior defensive line, like all of that, I would love it. Byron Murphy's another guy whose stock seems to be going up a little bit as well. Leonard Taylor from Miami. These are a lot of guys that I would love to see in the orange and blue. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to wrap this up right now. Please consider subscribing if you like to talk Broncos. And always happy to answer your questions on here. I'm sure I'll be on here over the next couple days, tomorrow and Saturday, with it being the weekend. Please subscribe on Spotify as well. This episode will be up later this afternoon. Y'all take care, have a wonderful weekend, and go Broncos.